Welcome back, flower lovers. Today is going to be a fun episode Rochana and I have planned for you. We have been talking about doing something kind of entertaining, something a little on the lighter side. And we both shared with each other our secret hobby, this game we play that whenever we watch films or TV shows or whatever, we go into what essences would I choose for this character. And I'd been doing this for years and I never had a buddy to do it with. And it turns out Rose also been doing it. And we thought, oh, let's do something crazy. And we thought we'd talk about flower essences for the Star Wars universe characters because both of us are fans, obviously. And we hope you are too. And even if you're not, maybe listen in anyways, because these issues are interesting to sort of play with and look and reflect and see how they resonate in each of our lives. So welcome back. It's been fun to think about this ahead of time, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say about these topics, Ro.
Yeah, it's just something I always do. Is really funny that we figured out that we both tend to do that with fictional characters. And of course, we are Generation X through and through, and grew up on the original Star Wars, A New Hope, and that trilogy. And then, of course, well, we're not going to talk about the prequels today. We're just going to pretend those
Let
don't
those
exist.
go.
Even though I absolutely love Ewan McGregor and Natalie Portman. But yes, the newer movies too have been just fantastic, and also in deepening some of these characters that we know and love and have grown up with. So if you haven't seen Star Wars, or there might be some spoiler alerts here because I don't know if we can talk about it without giving some things away. So you might want to crawl out under that rock if you haven't seen them.
Yeah, that was my thought. I'm like, if you haven't seen it, then you don't want to see it, and maybe this is going to spur you to get involved. So
That's true too. But yeah, that's why another reason why we thought it would be a safe pick to do Star Wars, because almost everybody has seen it or is at least aware of the characters in the universe. But before we get into that, I mean, there's kind of like maybe a bigger picture too with this universe and the broader themes of these movies. What do you think about that?
well, that's what makes them interesting and timeless, especially the earliest ones are these archetypal mythic issues. The characters aren't as perhaps well drawn isn't the word I'm looking for, but the characters in the newer ones have more, there's more of like emotional, there's more like connection to character as being as if they're more like people. And in the earlier ones, they're more sort of broadly drawn mythic types of characters. So it is interesting to look at the range of the series and look at different essences for them, because in the earlier ones we're talking more of these, it's really these mythic figures that we're looking at. And so we're talking about these really big picture issues that we can see reflected in our own lives. I know that of late I've been doing some inner work on some things that have been coming up, particularly in the last year or two, that are really about my father. And my father passed away when I was a teenager. And so there's a lot about him that I don't really know him as an adult, obviously, because I was a kid. But these legacies, these family ancestral legacies, and especially in Star Wars and in my life, not really healthy ones. And so I've been exploring and doing some release work with essences and inner processes to help to heal that, because I'm carrying this legacy of some of these unhealthy beliefs or unhealthy patterns through in my life, and I'm really ready to be moving forward with that. And it's been really interesting to kind of do that inner work with the help of the essences. And when we've talked about and we've been thinking about planning this episode, it's like, oh yeah, this is this great mythic inner work that we do in our own lives that we can kind of see shown in things like these films.
Yeah, that is it's really deep deep work, right, to be going there and working through that. And it speaking of, like working with the father legacy, I mean, that's such a theme in these movies. And also, this abandonment with being given up at birth to be raised by other folks. We saw that with Luke Skywalker. We saw that with Rey, and this sort of really, deep sense of missing out on that family connection. I know with Rey, um, she's always waiting for her parents to come back, and but we kind of pretty much figure that they're probably dead, and so I think Forget Me Not would be really helpful for her feelings of isolation and loneliness following that loss and that abandonment of her parents, and then also to just promote that spiritual connection with them, wherever they are. um so in the beginning, and it's more in the Force Awakens, right, where we meet her and see how she is so just kind of isolated and alone and searching for that connection with her family.
The orphan theme runs throughout the films, and that, it's abandonment, but it's also orphanhood, which is, just one other version of abandonment, right? And this quality of not having that connection, and seeking that connection with a paternal or maternal figure, is something that, essences can really help us to connect to maybe higher forms. Certainly we see quite a lot of unhealthy father figures, let's say, in these films, like super unhealthy. And so these qualities of helping you internally to connect to what is good and healthy about the that relationship that we seek. There's just so much there, and I think that the baby blue eyes is one that I would be thinking of for, a lot of the characters in the film, of that positive quality of the father, those positive qualities of authority. Certainly we see just endless shows of, poor use of force and authority. In certainly Emperor Palpatine is sort of the ultimate Vine character. A lot of power used very badly, and manipulative of the souls and spirits of others. So I think that's one that I think of, like the ultimate evil male character.
Yeah, I agree. And then Kylo Ren, of course. So his character is so complex and wonderful and really well played um, by Adam Driver. And he becomes needy and self-centered. He's always trying to get attention through his negative behavior, and that baby blue eyes, would help him feel more uh, uh, to just nurture his own inner child, that he was like so disappointed in his parents for kind of sending him off to Jedi school and not paying attention to him. And so his negative attention seeking behavior was a big thing, and then that turned into psychic manipulation. um, he also became very hot-headed and radical, just with a violent temper. So things like Akatillo would be from Desert Alchemy would be a great essence, right, for that sort of psychic fire and emotional reactivity, and how he would project that in a distorted way and act out in anger and violence. Those are some of the things I would think for Kylo Ren. But he also, when he was in with the dark side, that vine, like you say, to address that desire for power and control. But I would also add Centauri, because he was easily seduced and dominated by Supreme Leader Snoke and the dark side. It's so fun to talk about.
It is pretty entertaining. I'm really hoping that at some point we get into a fierce disputed argument about these things, because isn't that how these sort of conversations go? The lower the stakes, the bigger the argument. But yeah, I mean, and I think watching Kylo Ren and his just explosive temper tantrums, like all over the place. I the whole time I was watching that, I was thinking, oh my God, like a huge dose of Holly needs to go into this whole field, because it is that essence that helps with that uncontrolled emotionality, uncontrolled attention seeking, uncontrolled, jealousy and rages and things like that. And Holly is just, one of those broad-based remedies that would be useful to kind of take off the edge of that. And then you can actually get more into what's underneath that, which is, probably more that abandonment stuff, that pain. And the pain is acting out in these really dramatic and really toxic ways. In so many toxic ways. I think I wanted to talk about the mother principle too a little bit, because there's I think we're going to talk a little bit about Leia, about how that mother principle can play out, and how certainly in Kylo Ren's scenario, how he felt abandoned, presumably, we're all assuming, by his mother as well, being sent off. And so Mariposa Lily is one that I use a lot for sort of distorted mother relationship, and it helps to connect to that higher quality of love, even if it was only available in very small doses, or if it just got distorted along the way. And it bridges with Luke's scenario of feeling, abandoned, sort of orphanhood, with his family, being absent roughly. The splendid Mariposa Lily, which is from the FES range of light, it works on that quality of that soul, that deep soul abandonment, like the world has abandoned me. So the Mariposa lilies, and there's a variety of different Mariposa lilies that all work on this mother principle. And there's so many little pieces in each character where you could be thinking, oh yeah, that would be just the right thing for that individual. And I know that you wanted to talk about Leia a bit.
Yeah, well, also just back to Luke, though, looking at his trajectory in these movies, he started out as, a young man with his head in the clouds, always sort of dreaming of the stars and never feeling at home on Tatooine. So I think that clematis would help him kind of operate in the here and now, at least so he could get his work done on Uncle Owen's farm while he lived there. It's nice to have dreams, but you also have to live in the real world, right? But then when he starts his Jedi training, and he really does have to work at it, like we all do, to harness our own thoughts and our mind, and lotus flower essence could help him with meditation and learning to control his self, in order to use the Force properly. And so I've kind of thought about those, and I for the earlier movies with Luke, there's probably a lot more. It's kind of like that classic hero's journey with him, but we don't really get deep into his sort of psyche until we get a little farther into the newer movies, I think. And he has this deep pain and anguish for his what he thought it was his fault for how Kylo Ren, who was Ben Solo, how he turned into Kylo Ren and embraced the dark side. And then Luke said he would never, teach another Jedi again. And he self-exiled himself onto that little, rock in the middle of the sea, on some planet. And so, okay, so that's the first geek mistake. I don't know the name of that place. if you
Yeah.
if you can put it, we could look that up later. I like to not make the geek mistakes, but
I don't think that it's possible to have a conversation without making at least one geek mistake. So, don't write angry letters, please. But, by all means, help us out here in the comments on Insta or whatever. Let us know where we've gone awry. Because no doubt this is only the first. I have to make at least one. That seeking, that wanting for something different in that hero's journey, like you were saying with the Clematis, he like wasn't happy with where he was. He was always looking for somewhere else. He was always, living in the future instead of living in that moment. And I think you're right that Lotus is exactly an essence that's so helpful in that, because not only does it help you expand into the upper realms, it also helps you ground down into where you actually are in that reality of where where your feet are. And that's certainly something that Yoda, hammered him with, of never where you were, never focusing on the here and now. And one of the things that I think kind of is underneath that unwillingness to be in the here and now is a feeling of not being at home where you are. You feel like you're supposed to be somewhere else, or you just don't feel attached to your environment. And I would think sweet pea would be useful in that circumstance, because sweet pea is really wonderful anytime you've been dislocated or you just don't feel like you belong in the community where you are. And I think that Luke sort of showed a lot of that. And it sort of is, I think that theme runs throughout the whole series, because we're all traveling between planets and nobody is really home. So it's kind of, I think it's sort of a sweet pea infused scenario.
Sweet pea to feel at home on Tatooine. But yeah, and then also, just in that whole journey of learning to feel the Force and reach out with your feelings, Luke, and to just start to connect to that. I think that Serato too would be something helpful for connecting with that inner guidance and that inner knowing,
Oh, I
along with
couldn't
that
agree more.
Lotus. Yeah.
Yeah, that is such a core remedy for the disconnection that happens. And you see it in a lot of the characters, and you see it certainly in a lot of our lives, where we have been taught to ignore our inner guidance. We've been taught that somebody else's authority is more important, or more, you should be privileging that information more than what's coming out of yourself. And that's certainly something that he was taught to do, is to pay attention to those feelings, to pay attention to that connection to his higher self, or the Force, whatever we want to call it. And Serato is just brilliant for helping to open up that connection and helping you to trust your own feelings, to trust your own guidance and intuition in every circumstance. And it's, to me, that seems like another core remedy that we'd love to see Kylo Ren take, because he lost his way, and he lost his ability to connect to his own. He got overshadowed by other forces that were strong and deleterious.
Yeah, and so we're starting to see some of these themes with um getting, I guess, sucked in by the dark side, um and part of those, flower essence that might be helpful for that are some of the protective essences like yarrow and angelica, to stay connected with the the higher self and the angelic realm. um and I think something like St. John's wort, to just keep that light filled awareness as part of the psyche and the consciousness. And then maybe some more protective and repellent essences for keeping the dark side at bay. Something like hematite and pennyroyal, or Alaskan's purification even. What do you think about other essences for kind of dealing with that darkness?
This is a big one. And I see it. Oh, where to even start? I keep going back in my mind to that journey on Yoda's home planet when Luke was in training, where he went down into that tunnel, which is that that classic setup for confronting the shadow. And so much of the attachments, or the ability for negative forces to attach, in my view, come from insufficient awareness of our unconscious and our shadow. And by doing, shadow work, or recognizing the unconscious stuff that's coming up that we might be projecting onto someone else, or we might be creating, like in that scene where he's fighting Vader, and yet when the mask comes off, he sees his own face. And it's this inner battle that's being created in manifested in the outer realm, or in the physical realm, that so you could run that a bunch of different ways. But I think that in our lives, so much of this darkness is actually stuff that we're not connecting to, or recognizing, or addressing, and that it really starts showing up in our face. And so I completely agree that keeping your field intact and pure and clear is appropriate, with yarrow, like everything yarrow. And the purification formula is super for helping to really clear stuff off of your field. But then also, in addition, to be looking at shadow content as well. My favorite for that is the Night Blooming Sirius from Jane Bell's Essences, because that helps. It's this crazy cactus that grows up in the trees um, in Hawaii, and it blooms at night, and the flowers, I mean, it basically looks like there's full moons coming out of the trees everywhere you look. These huge flowers, and that quality of blooming in the middle of the night and just shining that light, it completely illuminates these shadow issues that are where a lot of us is stored, where we've decided that that's not part of us, and instead we can kind of connect to the pieces of us that need that love and care and attention, and in order to transform them into something positive, useful, growthful, helpful. I don't know if that's a bit of a digression from where we were, but I think that it's a useful one in this context.
So useful, and not just in the context of these movies and these characters, but in what we're going through now in the world today. I mean, our shadows are coming up, I think, now more than ever before. And it's absolutely applicable and topical to everything that's happening, I think, in the world today. We're being confronted by our shadows. We're ripping off the masks and seeing ourselves. I mean, wow. I think that's pretty profound. Definitely.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that angle, but yes, I think that this year and change that we've been going through has given us a certain level of enforced stillness. The retreat to to Yoda's planet, where nothing else is allowed except for this thing. You're in training, you can't even leave, right? And on some level, we've been in that quality of training, and then there's this opportunity, this opening and possibility to examine some of the shadow material. And I think that's really where I am right now. I'm really looking at some of this stuff that these ancestral gifts from my father and the paternal line as well, not just one person, but that whole line, and helping to clear that and heal that. It's that great work that Luke did with helping his father shift before he passed. And most of us are not going to have the opportunity to have that grand cinematic scene, but we can do that work no matter what the a life status is of our family members. We can do that work with them participating from other realms. And I think that that's something good to remember, that you don't necessarily have to work with them in the physical. They can be worked with beyond that. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the conifers in this context. Black spruce is one that comes up for me a lot when we're dealing with ancestral healing. the conifers, I think, hold a really ancient energy, and a lot of times it's sort of more of a masculine type of energy. And the black spruce helps to clarify some of these patterns that have, that we are imprinted with, right, from our ancestral lines. And also I wanted, like, the partner essence, or one of the partner essences for that is cinnabar. And cinnabar is the gem essence that helps to, like, uncover, unbury, and transform some of these karmic and ancestral issues. I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about some of the guilt patterns that have passed along this line of Jedi when they've messed up the trainings.
Well, yeah, right along with what you're saying, that the conifers and the pine is one that would absolutely um, not just help really. I mean, it's great for releasing self-blame and regret and remorse. And we could see where that would be really helpful with like Luke when he blamed himself for what happened with Kylo Ren. But then it also helps to cleanse that ancestral guilt that's related to the deeds of the people in your line, as particularly like he had the guilt of the deeds of his father, Darth Vader. And then we also see that in as something that Rey might be helpful for her too, because she comes to realize that she is also descended from, well, Emperor Palpatine. So that is a big, big ancestral epigenetic issue to deal with for her. Definitely that cinnabar I could see helping with that dark, working on that dark ancestral energy as well. Um, but I wanted to let's quickly talk about like Han and Leia, because we kind of haven't dived into them too much. Han was a little more, difficult because he's more that archetypal character. It doesn't really go that deep into him unless I guess you watch the Solo movie, which isn't really part of the main trilogies here. But he's the cynical smuggler. He comes off as overconfident and doesn't believe in all that superstitious nonsense and doesn't want to get involved initially in the rebellion. And so maybe there's a few essences that we could use for him to see the good in people and transform his pessimism. Are there any that come to mind for you?
Oh, a couple. Um, yeah, for sure, Hound's tongue makes a lot of sense in this context. Hound's tongue is helpful whenever, you know, that what is that quote of, ancient kooky religions and ancient weapons are no match for a blaster at your side. I had to do a quote. I'm sure I did that wrong. I'm sorry, people. I'm sorry, serious fans. But there's that quality of the only thing that's real is what's in my hand. The only thing that's real are the credits in my on my ship, and helping him to see how there can be larger parts of the world. There can be larger forces at play and qualities that you want to open to, and then underneath that, I think, is a closed heartedness. When you have that very glib exterior and that very cocky kind of attitude, I think underneath of that is a lot of sort of unrecognized pain. Who knows what his whole story was. I haven't really gone for deep into the canon, but to me it seems like agrimony is a possibility for that type of personality, where it's all about surface jokes, talking, just sort of being out there in your personality, and as a some sort of refusal for being recognizing what's going on in your heart.
Yeah, I mean, they go into in the Solo movie a little bit about how he was sort of betrayed and left by the love of his life. So exactly, he has that pain from his early, you know, days that he is covering up. But then as that, pessimism is the longer that it is in your psyche, the harder of a shell it makes and the harder it is to kind of crack that shell. So I think that, I don't know, Beach might be helpful for him to see the good in people instead of automatically having that distrust, and also maybe Gorse for dealing with that pessimism and helping him to feel faith and hope instead of just being pessimistic all the time.
Yeah, I
And
agree. Makes sense.
yeah,
And then we wanted to talk about the Leia
Leia, yeah,
scenario
because
also, because she's a
right.
big part of this picture.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Leia, she has a lot of power. She's been, bred for power, essentially. She's been bred to lead her people. And as part of that, there are certainly moments and elements that feel very much like a Vervain kind of scenario. Because she has that really intense personality. She's got, and you have to be, right? She's in the middle of a war. So she's got to be, there's no time for for the niceties. But perhaps the Vervain essence could help calm that a little bit more, help her to feel a little bit less intense and be able to take that role of responsibility a little bit more easily.
Yeah. So, I mean, we see her much more in that um, workaholic, so, I mean, high strung, even zealous personality in the earlier days, where she's trying to recruit everyone, to her cause. And I look at her and I see Ophidiadosh like right away. She's very reactive, has firm principles. So that Vervain is perfect. Also, maybe some impatience and some Snapdragon to help with her causticness. But then later in the more recent trilogy, she's definitely matured, and she's a much more, I guess, level-headed commander. Um and of course, though, she's still completely dedicated, and there's some hard times. I mean, the rebellion has at every turn it looks like they're just going to be crushed, and they have limited resources against insurmountable odds. So she you know is under a lot of pressure, and probably feeling quite defeated towards the end. And so, I think Oak would be something that could just help give her that strength and support to keep on going.
So agree that oak is a primary essence for somebody in her position, because it gives you that strength to manage. I mean, she's managing so many different elements, and has been for so long, and been supporting this whole movement for so long with her, strength of will and force of personality, as much as anything. And the oak, I think she's really, especially in the mature stage, she's definitely an oak type. Because if you look at the way she passed, it was just this sudden, she's gone. And oak has that quality. Part of it too is that, an oak, when it passes, it tends to pass pretty quickly, and it'll just kind of like split. In my neighborhood, in our neck of the woods with the native oaks, they just will drop limbs overnight, or will just split in half overnight. And I think there's a certain part of that oak personality that can be prone to those sort of collapses. And elm too, right? I mean, she's so capable, but elm would be useful for that. There have to be moments, perhaps we don't see them on screen, but there have to be moments where she's feeling completely overwhelmed.
Yeah. And, rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. What a wonderful actress, and, kind of light that she brought to these movies. So I just got a little teary-eyed for a second there while you were talking.
You're so right. Growing up and having her as a strong female leadership character, we did not get a lot of that growing up. And I think that her portrayal of Leia, and that embodiment of that character gave a lot of us Gen Xers somebody to live up to. And so maybe it's more common now. I hope it becomes more common and more common, but it's something that really impacted me. I know she was certainly, that character was a hero for me.
So true. I mean, that, yeah, the first kind of female action star, really, that I don't know, that I remember. And it was profound for me to see that. It was really, really cool. So, yeah. Anyway, anyone else, we didn't mention Obi-Wan, but he sort of became, at least in the end, kind of, a master, just like Yoda. I don't think they need a lot of flower essences, but he certainly did blame himself for a while for what happened with Vader, just like Luke blamed himself with what happened with Kylo Ren. There's another case right there for Pine, and releasing, that guilt and taking too much responsibility for the actions of others.
That it comes together with what we referred to a little bit earlier, is these patterns that repeat and cycle through time. This pattern that happened with Vader and Obi-Wan, and then it repeats itself later on with Luke and Kylo Ren, and those patterns, those dysfunctional patterns that repeat. We have certainly talked about a few essences, but I think white lupin might be a useful essence to think about as well, to help with those unhealthy ancestral patterns that need that transformation into the lighter side, into the qualities where we can take the good parts of our ancestors, the good parts of that line, and let go of the things that don't serve, that are unhealthy.
Absolutely. And just to, wrap it up, we don't want to leave Chewbacca out because we love Chewie. And, the first thing that comes to mind, is like, well, you don't want to upset a Wookiee. Like, we hear that over and over again. Like, so maybe there's some anger management stuff. Although in reality, he's really just sort of highly, like, he just shows his emotions when things happen. So I don't know if it's always necessarily anger when he roars. There's a lot more nuance to that. But if he has difficulty containing his emotional energy, hematite might be something that could be helpful. And if he gets frequently upset, the chamomile might help to restore some calm to his demeanor.
Oh, I love that idea. I had, in my thinking process of essences for these characters, I had not considered Chewbacca. So I thank you for bringing Chewie into this realm. And man, chamomile for Chewbacca, it could not be more appropriate. So agreed.
And if there is a really an anger challenge there, maybe some scarlet monkey flower for helping him to master his really strong emotions. But
And
yeah.
that Ocotillo pattern, it fits in with him as well, where it's that big dramatic reaction that fires up. Although in IRL, the Ocotillo makes more sense when, for the way I see it, the way I tend to use it in practice, is when that anger floods up and it fires out kind of the top of your head, but then it leaves you exhausted. It really overwhelms you in the moment, and then you don't have anything left. It's not like a really good use of anger where you set this fabulous boundary, and you maybe have to blow up a little bit, but it doesn't deplete you. And I see Ocotillo as being one of those essences that helps when that depletion pattern emerges. I don't think Chewie gets depleted so much, but it's an interesting thinking. We don't speak his language.
If only we
it's hard
could,
to know.
yes. I was just gonna say that.
Oh, we're having such fun with this episode.
Yeah.
This is way too entertaining for us.
It is.
Was there any other piece that we think that we missed on this, or
I
we've
think we
certainly
really
talked about a lot of the characters?
Yeah, we certainly did. I mean, the only other thing is there's sort of this fear of losing control that cherry plum is really good for. And I think the characters that are learning to use their powers, and like Rey especially, she has so much power and she is afraid she's gonna kill somebody or hurt somebody or use it in a dark way. And that's something that she definitely needs to work on in her Jedi training. And the cherry plum might help with that fear. Um, Also, essences that help her just become herself and trust herself. So, that she's a great character. We could definitely talk about her and Kylo Ren probably for a whole episode without all the rest. It's like they have really gone in some dramatic complexity in the movies, and it's really fascinating. I just rewatched The Rise of Skywalker last night, since I had only seen it one time. So it's I'm just so happy that there were more movies made that after our initial trilogy from our generation that were so good and really brought the story to a whole new level. I don't know if there's going to be any more. I sure hope there is.
It is such a fascinating and rich universe, and it's such a fun place for us to play and enact these fantasies and enjoy the characters and as they develop and the stories. It is the mythology of now, right? We're working in the same fields, the same um, this rich soup of humans creating these mythic stories and creating these larger than life characters. So I think it's just an expression of the way that we experience them now, rather than initially maybe we were watching the stars and now we're watching Star Wars. So it is a fun thing to contemplate and to think about. And yeah, we could certainly go deeper into the dysfunctional relationship patterns, but we might throw that into its whole show, of unboundaried stalking behaviors and that sort of thing, that we saw in Kylo Ren's and Rey's relationship. But I think that this has been really fascinating, and it's been fascinating to think about it ahead of time. Like, what are we going to talk about in context of this? Because it's not just a geek out fest. This is really good stuff.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's we like to do a lighthearted episode every summer, or at least sprinkle that in every once in a while as we also have deep topics. But as you can see, this, even though it's lighthearted, we still touch on the deep topics. We go there. That's what we do in flower essence therapy. So it's a natural for us.
Full agreement. There, and I want to end, if I may.
Mhm.
I had one more thought that I wanted to maybe end on, because in this moment we're experiencing some very intense times. We've got some really the virus situation is very intense and intensifying right now, and we're looking into another, like, oh my god, is this happening again? And I think on some levels we can relate to the characters, fighting these epic mythic battles, and that sense of disheartenment and the sense of, like, this is never going to be over, and we're never um never going to be safe, or whatever. And it's such a sweet chestnut moment, and there's so many times in the films where it looks like insurmountable odds, and how is this ever going to work? And I think on some level we're experiencing a little bit of that too, and the sweet chestnut can be a really good companion for you as you work this internal struggle of our lives and where we are in the world right now. And sweet chestnut gives us that hope, that ability to dig deep and to find that place of hope and trust that it's going to work out, that there's going to be a way through.
It's beautifully said, and so so true and perfect for the moment. Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you all our listeners and our patrons. We appreciate you so much, and so happy to have you on this journey with us. And we hope to see you on social media. And what essences do you think fit for these characters, or some of the characters we haven't talked about? I'd love to hear what you think, and just go to town and have fun with it. It's a great exercise.
It really is. It's a fun exercise when you're learning to use essences to play along with your favorite shows and assess them for essences. So this has been really fun. I'm really glad we spent this time together, and thanks to all of you listeners and patrons and supporters of the show. And we really do look forward to these conversations, that you tell us what we missed, and who we missed, because we're just as nerdy and we want to keep playing nerd games.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye now.